My family stole every beast I had raised and threw me outside the city gates, not knowing I had read this novel and already knew where the god dragon was sealed. And I let them take everything. All 3 contracts, ripped from my wrist and handed to my brother Kale, while the elders nodded, and my father signed the discharge paper without reading it. I stood there with 3 empty soul slots and said nothing. Because here is what they did not understand. A tamer's limit is 3 contracts. You are never meant to go empty. But I had transmigrated into this world 3 months ago. I had read every arc, every trap, every ending. And I knew that the legendary sealed beasts in this novel, the ones nobody in this world had ever located, could only be bonded by a tamer with nothing left. 3 slots. 3 beasts. 3 seals cracking before the demon lord arrived. My family had just handed me everything. The formal hall smelled like old incense and colder stone. 2 rows of elders stood along the walls, robes stitched with the Veer crest, faces arranged into the same practiced neutrality. My father sat at the center table. The discharge document lay in front of him, ink already drying. He did not look at it. He looked at the space just above my head, the way you look at a chair you are about to move. Kale stood opposite me, younger by 2 years, taller by an inch this month and already reaching. His arm was extended, palm up, wrist bare and waiting. He wanted this part. He had wanted it for a long time. The elder to my father's right raised a hand. The removal began. You do not simply cancel a beast contract. The bond is threaded into the tamer's soul like gold wire through cloth, and pulling it free is a physical thing. The first mark tore away from my wrist, and it felt like a burning stitch being drawn out slow. I did not flinch. I had promised myself I would not flinch. Thuganow. The gold thread of the second mark lifted, unwound, and crossed the air between us. It sank into Kyle's wrist and took hold there. His eyes flickered. Pride. Hunger. Hunger. Ticket! The third came away the hardest. It always does. That was my oldest bond, my first, and for 1 heartbeat, the soul slot resisted like a root that did not want to leave the ground. Then it gave. The thread pulled loose. It floated to Kale and settled. On. And there it was, the hollow. I felt the 3 slots open inside me all at once, and it was not pain. It was a warmth going empty. Like 3 rooms in a house that had always been furnished, and now the furniture was carried out, and the rooms simply stood there with the light coming in and nothing to fill them. Most tamers spend their whole lives afraid of that emptiness. I stood in it and did not name what I was thinking. Not here. Not in front of them. Why, for the A. That was as far as I let the thought go. Behind the elders, a side door stood half open, and through it I could see the beasts. My beasts. The ones being handed over. The storm lion, mane crackling faint blue, filled the doorway with its shoulders. Behind it, the silver hawk perched on a rail. Lower, near the floor, the ember fox waited with its tail curled around its feet. As the last contract locked into Kale's wrist, all 3 of them turned and looked at me. The storm lion dipped its head, just slightly, the way it used to when I came home late and it wanted me to know it had noticed. The silver hawk did not move for 2 full seconds. 2 seconds is a long time for a hawk. It should have shifted its weight to Kale the instant the bond changed hands. It didn't. It stared at me. The ember fox took 1 step toward me, small paw forward, over the threshold, toward the man who no longer owned it. Then the new bond finished settling, and it stopped mid-step, 1 foot still raised, caught between 2 masters. Kale saw all of it. He said nothing. But his jaw tightened, a small hard motion at the corner of his face, and I watched the first hairline crack run through his confidence. He had expected the beasts to be property that transferred cleanly. Instead, they had looked back at me, and he had seen it, and now he would have to wonder about it. I filed the moment away and kept my face still. They still know me, I thought, for now. My father signed nothing else. He slid the discharge paper across the table toward a waiting clerk, and he still had not read a word of it. That detail mattered. I made sure to notice it, because someday it would matter to him too. I had watched him for 3 months, since the day I woke up in this body with another man's memories and a novel behind my eyes. He was not a cruel man. That was the thing people always got wrong about Lord Veer. He was not cruel and he was not stupid. He was tired. And he was frightened of the elders. And he had learned long ago that the easiest path through a hard room was to sign what was put in front of him and let stronger men decide the shape of things. He had signed away armies that way. He had signed away marriages. Today he signed away a son, and it cost him nothing, because he had trained himself for years not to read the papers that would cost him something. The ceremony was not angry. That was the strange part. Nobody shouted. It was my 18th birthday, and the disowning had the calm rhythm of a thing decided long ago and merely being performed on schedule. A signature. A transfer. A door. They walked me out. The city registry board stood in the public square, and the clerks were already updating my file when I got there. quills scratching in the open air where anyone could watch. People did watch. A man carrying bread stopped. 2 women slowed. A student in Academy Gray went very still. The ledger read, RNVR. Contracts 0. Sponsor revoked. House affiliation removed. Someone laughed. Short, ugly, from the back of the small crowd. The student in gray did not laugh. He went pale and looked at the ground, because he understood what 0 contracts meant. It meant a tamer with nothing. It meant, in this world, a walking corpse. That was the fear this whole society was built on. A tamer's worth was his beasts, and his beasts were his bloodline, passed down like a name. You inherited your contracts, you died, and passed them on. To reach 0 was not a setback. It was a kind of death that left you breathing, a man cut loose from the only thing that made him count. The people watching the ledger dry were not cruel either. They were just looking at a corpse and adjusting to the fact that it could still stand. None of them knew what I knew, that the fear had a floor under it. That the one door in this world that opened only for a man at 0 led somewhere they could not imagine, and that my family had just kicked me through it. Down the far street, a formal parade was forming. The Veyer banner rose over it, green and gold, and Kale walked beneath it with the storm lion at his heel, and the elders arranged around him like a frame around a portrait. The new heir, the strong one, he did not look at me, not once. That took effort, and I respected the effort, because it told me he was still thinking about the doorway. I watched the ink on my ledger dry. And I calculated. Then I turned west. The gate captain saw me coming and stepped into my path. He was not cruel about it. He knew who I was, or who I had been that morning, and he knew where the western road led. It led out of the city and into the Black Pine Wilds, and nobody walked into the Black Pine Wilds on purpose. You can't go out there, he said. There's nothing out there but dying. I held up the discharge paper, still wet at the seal. I'm not a citizen, I said. You have no authority to stop me. Read it. He read it. His face changed. A citizen he could turn back. A discharged man was not his problem, and the law was very clear about whose problem I was, which was nobody's. He stepped aside. He did not want to. He stepped aside anyway. A crowd had gathered at the gate wall by then, drawn the way crowds always are to someone about to do something final. I heard the whispers as I passed under the arch. That's the western route. The original Aaron went out there, 3 years back, never came home. There was nothing left of him, nothing to bury. I kept walking, and I did not correct them, because they were right. They just did not know how right. The boy who had lived in this body before me, the first Aaron, the real one, had walked out this same gate 3 years ago and died somewhere in that black forest. I knew that. I knew it better than the people whispering it, because I had read it. I had read the chapter where he died and the thing that killed him and the exact stretch of dry riverbed where his story ended. I was the replacement. I had woken up in his life 3 months ago with a novel's worth of knowledge behind my eyes, and now I was walking the road that had ended him. On purpose, because I knew something the whole city did not. 72 hours. That was the number that mattered. In 72 hours, the Demon Lord's first seal would crack, a thing this world did not see coming, a thing written into the last chapters of a book only I had read. The city behind me would go on with its parades and its ledgers, and none of them would feel the clock that had just started ticking the moment my foot crossed the gate line. I felt it start. I swear I felt it. Let me tell you what that number meant. The Demon Lord did not appear all at once. He arrived in stages, each one beginning with a seal cracking somewhere in the far sky. The first crack came 72 hours from a fixed point the novel had marked, the disowning of a nameless Veyer son on his 18th birthday. My first read, I had not understood why the book bothered to date a god's return to the humiliation of a minor noble. Then I woke up inside that noble, and I understood. The emptying of a tamer and the waking of a god were the same event, 2 threads in one knot, and I was standing in the middle of it. 72 hours. The city would spend them on parades. I would spend them collecting the 3 things the Demon Lord had spent 300 years keeping apart. The forest took the light almost at once, black pine grew close and tall, and the mist between the trunks never lifted, day or night. The air was colder than the season allowed, the sounds were wrong, bird call a half-beat late, wind that moved branches on the wrong side. A normal person would have turned back at the tree line. A normal person should. I did not slow down. I knew the path. Turn at the split rock. There. The boulder cloven down the middle like an axe had done it, exactly where the book said it would be. Follow the dry riverbed east from there. I moved with the certainty of a man walking his own house in the dark, and the 3 empty slots rode inside me the whole way, open and aching, wounds or hands, I could not decide which. One thought tried to surface. I let it, once. What if the novel lied? What if the cave was just words on a page? And the god dragon was a story someone invented, and I had walked into the place that killed the last Aaron carrying nothing but confidence and 3 empty rooms. I pushed it down. I had read the ending. I had read past the ending, into the appendices and the maps and the sealed places nobody in this world had ever found. The god dragon was real. It had been waiting 300 years for a tamer with room enough to hold it. I thought about the first Aaron as I walked. It felt right too, on the path that had killed him. 18 years old, disowned on his birthday, walking west into the wilds with nothing. The same as me, except he had gone out of despair and I was going out of arithmetic. He had not known there was a cave, or a dragon, or a mechanic that opened doors for the empty. He had simply been a boy with nowhere left to be, and the forest had taken him the way it took everyone who came to it with nothing but grief. I owed him something for the body I was wearing. The least I could do was finish the thing he never knew was here. The riverbed curved east. The mist thickened. Somewhere ahead the ground began to slope down toward the collapsed cliff I had not seen yet but already knew. The forest closed behind me. Ahead, somewhere in the dark, something was already awake. The dry riverbed ended at a wall of stone. The cliff had collapsed here, long ago, and the dead fall of black pine lay across it like a barricade nobody had built on purpose. I climbed over the trunks slow, testing each one, and on the far side the air changed. It went still. It went wrong in a way I recognized from the pages of a book. Behind the deadfall, set into the broken cliff face, was a cave. And across its mouth hung a seal. Not iron, not wood, but compressed aura, a curtain of hardened intention that had been holding for 300 years. It was bleeding. It had been bleeding for decades, thin threads of gold light weeping out of the cracks, and the light had drawn things here. The cave floor was a graveyard. Beasts, dozens of them, frozen in the exact postures they had died in. A wolf mid-lunge, jaws still open. A horned thing reared up on its hind legs, a serpent coiled to strike. Every one of them had come to break the seal from the outside, and every one of them had been crushed the instant they tried, and their bodies had never rotted. The seal did not allow it. They stood there like a warning nobody had lived to read. I understood the mechanic. I had read it. The seal did not measure strength, it measured intention. Anything that came at it as an attacker, anything reaching to take, to break, to seize, was crushed on contact. That was what had killed everything on the floor. But a tamer with empty hands, a tamer with nothing to grab with, a tamer whose slots were open and asking rather than taking, the seal read as no threat at all. I had 3 empty slots. I walked in. I did not touch anything. I did not reach for the light. I kept my hands loose at my sides and my intention soft, and the seal let me pass through it like I was made of the same mist that filled the forest. The dead beasts watched me go by with their frozen eyes. I did not look at them longer than I had to. Gold light deepened as the cave opened up. Old tribute lay in heaps along the walls, offerings from a civilization that no longer existed, gold plate and carved stone and things people had begged with long ago. And at the far end, coiled around a natural column of rock that rose from floor to ceiling, was the god dragon. It filled the chamber. Its head alone was the size of a barn door, scales the color of cooling iron, dark red shading to black in the folds, each one larger than my hand. The coils wound around the stone column 3-4 times, and I could not see where the body ended. This was the full ancient form. 300 years asleep, and it still radiated a heat that touched my face from 30 feet away. I stopped. One eye opened. Gold iris, slit pupil, and it found me at once. It did not move. It did not rise or hiss or gather to strike. It simply looked at me, and I made myself hold that look, and I understood something the dead beasts on the floor had never gotten the chance to understand. That was not a look of warning. That was a look of inventory. It was counting me. Weighing what I carried, what I lacked, what room I had. Not deciding whether to kill me, deciding whether I would do. Behind me, off to the side, something scraped against stone. 2 shapes crouched behind a stalagmite near the cave mouth. Academy Gray. Scouts. They had followed me from the city, tracked me through the wilds, and slipped in after I broke the seal's attention on the way through. Now they could not move. The dragon's presence had them pinned the way it had pinned every attacker on the floor, frozen, breath held. They had come to see what the disgraced Aaron Vare was doing, walking to his death. They were about to witness something else. I raised my arm. I turned my wrist so the empty slots faced the dragon. 3 of them, open, unclaimed, offered. The god dragon considered. 3 seconds. That is all it was. But those 3 seconds stretched out like 3 years, and in them I felt the whole weight of the gamble I had made. If the book was wrong, if the mechanic was different. Then it rose. The cave shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the tribute, gold rattled in its heaps, and the 2 scouts made small sounds behind their rock. The dragon uncoiled from the column, and as it did, gold thread light poured out of the sealed stone and off its scales and streamed toward me, into my raised wrist, into the first open slot. The mark formed. It burned going in, but it was a clean burn, and when it settled I looked down and saw script I did not recognize. Not the letters of this world. Older, angular and strange, a language nobody had spoken in a very long time, wound around my wrist in gold that did not fade. For that one instant, before anything else happened, the bond opened both ways. I felt it reach into me the way I had reached into it. It found the empty slot and filled it, yes, but it also looked the way it had looked with its one gold eye, and this time it looked inside. I felt it brush against the thing I hid from everyone, the transmigration, the novel. The knowledge that I was not the boy who was born in this body. It touched all of it, and it did not recoil, and it did not judge. It simply noted it, the way it had noted everything else, and accepted the bargain anyway. A tamer with room. That was all it had ever needed, and whatever strange thing I was did not change the size of the room. The instant it locked, the dragon's aura collapsed inward. It was not weakness. I want to be clear about that because I felt it, and it was not the beast growing weak. It was the beast choosing. The ancient form folded down, smaller and smaller, the barn door head shrinking, the coils drawing in, all that mass compressing into something it could carry through the world without leveling it. The gold light dimmed to a glow. When it finished, there was a hatchling standing on the stone where a titan had been. The size of a large dog, red scales, each one gold at the tip. The same gold eyes, undimmed, watching me from a head I could now have held in 2 hands. It shook itself once, the way a dog shakes off water, and folded its small wings against its back. It had been waiting. That was all. 300 years sealed in a cave full of the dead, and it had not been trapped. It had been waiting for a tamer with room enough to hold it. Everything that had come before me had come to take. I had come with empty hands. That was the whole difference, and it had cost me my family and my name to have it. The sealed column cracked behind it. I heard the sound run up the stone, and then the whole pillar crumbled, and the gold light that had held for 3 centuries went out all at once. The tribute heaps dulled. The gold plate that had been an offering became gray dust as the aura that preserved it failed. 300 years of value collapsed into nothing in the span of a breath, because the thing it had all been guarding was now sitting on a rock looking at me. The 2 scouts came unfrozen. They stumbled, gasping, and one of them looked at the hatchling on the stone and then at me, and I watched him do the math and lose it. He turned to run. The hatchling looked at him. It did not growl, it did not move. It simply turned its head and fixed its gold eyes on the running man, and he stopped. Both feet planted. Frozen again, but not by a seal this time. By something in his own animal brain that knew, without being told, what it was looking at. You saw nothing, I said. Or you saw an F-grade tamer with a lizard. Pick one. Neither of them answered. That was fine. They would tell the story their own way, and it did not matter which way, because both ways ended with me. I looked at the hatchling. It looked back, unbothered, expecting nothing from me and offering nothing in return, and I decided I would name it later, when there was time, when a name would mean something. It did not seem to care either way. 66 hours, roughly. I had spent the night and the walk. The clock in my head kept counting, and I needed to move. I climbed back out over the deadfall with the hatchling on my shoulder, and the wilds let me pass, and by the time I reached the tree line, the sky had gone pale with dawn. I walked out of the black forest with the light behind me and a dog-sized dragon riding my shoulder, and the same crowd that had watched me leave was still gathered at the western gate. Or, gathered again, because a city loves nothing more than the return of a man it sent to die. The silence when they saw me was worth the whole night. The gate captain came forward, and this time he did not step into my path. He looked at the hatchling. He looked at me. He looked at the hatchling again, and I could see him reaching for a rule that would cover this and finding none. I held up the discharge paper. Still not a citizen, I said. Just passing through. The hatchling yawned. A small puff of smoke curled out of its mouth and drifted up between us, and the captain took a step back from it, and I walked through the gate into the city that had thrown me out. Word had run ahead of me. That was the only way to explain the size of the crowd. A night is not long. But a city that watches a man walk to his death will send someone running the moment he walks back out of it. And by the time I reached the inner streets, the news of it was moving faster than I was. Disgraced Arenver, alive. Arenver with a beast. The whispers followed me the way the death story had followed me out the gate the day before, except now they had reversed. And a reverse rumor moves twice as fast as a fresh one, because people love nothing more than being wrong in an interesting direction. There was a parade on the main street. KL's parade. The formal welcome for the new heir, banners high, elders arranged, the whole house celebrating the strength of its future. And leading the procession, main bright, was the Storm Lion, my Storm Lion. KL rode the attention of the crowd like it was his birthright, and I walked along the edge of that same crowd going the opposite direction, and for a moment neither of us saw the other. Then the hatchling passed within 20 feet of the Storm Lion. The lion stopped walking. It planted its feet in the middle of the street, in the middle of the parade, and it dropped its head, lower, lower, until its muzzle nearly touched the stones. A full bow. Complete submission, given not to KL who held its contract, but to the small red thing on my shoulder that it had recognized across a crowded street. The silver hawk left Kale's shoulder. It banked hard, climbed, and came down on a rooftop above the street, where it folded its wings and turned its head and watched the hatchling with a fixed, unblinking attention. It did not go back. The parade stopped. The whole thing came apart around Kale, the elders looking at the frozen lion, the crowd murmuring, and Kale standing in the center of it with his mouth slightly open and no idea what to say. He found me at the edge of the street. Our eyes met. I did not smile. I did not need to. The beasts remembered what a real legend smelled like. That was all, and now everyone had seen them remember. I went to the academy. The registration desk sat inside the main hall, and the registrar there was a tired woman with a scanner crystal and a long line she wanted to finish. She barely looked up when I reached her. She took my discharge paper, made a note, and reached for the crystal. East. I set the hatchling on the desk. It sat. She passed the scanner crystal over it, the way she must have done 10,000 times, expecting a grade to bloom in the glass. The crystal read, F grade. Then it went dark. She frowned and shook it, and for exactly 1 second before it died, the crystal flashed text across its face. Not a grade, not a number, but words, in a script the registrar clearly did not recognize, that she yanked the crystal off the desk to hide. I recognized it. I had 1 second. In that second I read 2 words. Forbidden legendary root. The scanner malfunctioned, the registrar said, too quickly, already reaching for a paper form. It happens. We'll put you down as F grade for now, pending a manual review. That'll do, I said. She wrote F grade on the form and pushed it toward me, relieved to have a category for me, relieved to make the strange thing small again. I took the form. I picked up the hatchling. It yawned once more and she flinched. The registrar had called it a malfunction. She would file it that way and forget it and sleep fine tonight. But I had seen what the crystal said before she killed it, and I knew exactly what those 2 words meant. They did not mean the machine was broken. They meant the machine had reached the bottom of everything it knew how to measure. And found something older than its whole catalog, and had no honest word for it but the one it flashed before it burned out. Nobody in the current era had ever seen what was writing on my wrist, not the Academy. Not the Council. Not the Demon Lord's own scouts, not yet. This was bigger than an F-grade desk. It was bigger than anything the Academy was built to hold. And I had 2 more of them to find. The Academy display boards went up at dawn on entrance day, and the whole first-year class crowded around them to find their names. KL's was easy to find. Top of the board, a Beast-Tamer, first rank, beast strength rated exceptional, sponsored by House Veyer. The elders had made sure of it. Students clustered under his name the way people gather under a statue. Mine was farther down, much farther. AREN Veyer. F grade. Beast 1, unclassified. Special note, scanner malfunction. The note was the part that drew them, an F grade they could have ignored. A malfunction they could not. A few students laughed when they found my line. A few looked at me with something closer to pity, which was worse. And a few, the careful ones, the ones who would matter later, read the word malfunction twice and then looked at the satchel on my back where the hatchling was sleeping and said nothing. KL's faction made a show of ignoring me. That was its own kind of attention. You do not perform your ignoring of someone who does not matter. The F grade. A voice cut across the courtyard, loud, pitched to Carrie. They let F grade in the front door now? My father pays tuition for this? Darius fell. Minor Lord's son, B grade, now first and Brain second. He had an audience and he wanted to use it, and I was the easiest target on the board. He went on about the malfunction, about trash tamers, about how the scanner probably broke from disappointment. I let him. I remembered him. In the novel, Darius Fell became the man who opened 3 restricted vault doors during the siege. The difference between a lot of people living and dying, and he did it because somewhere along the way he had learned to be brave. He was not brave yet, he was loud. But I needed him alive, and I did not need to burn him for a joke, so I let the laughter run out on its own and walked past it toward the historical registry. The Academy kept its old records in a high, quiet room that smelled of dust and cold metal. Professor Laren worked there most mornings, cataloging beast sightings that were too rare to file anywhere useful. He was old and slight and easy to overlook, and I had read enough of the novel to know that overlooking Lauren was the most dangerous mistake in the building. I came to find the God Dragon's name. I did not come to introduce myself. I knew better than that. In the novel, the students who tried to impress Laren were the ones he forgot. And the ones who came with a real question were the ones he remembered, and being remembered by Laren was a thing you wanted to control the timing of. I came with a real question, and I kept it small. Lauren was at a long table sorting reference plates, thin sheets of etched metal, each one older than the Academy itself. I asked, plainly, if the registry had anything on legendary beasts from before the founding. He did not look up. He gestured at a shelf. I found it faster than I expected. A plate near the bottom, corroded at the edges, and etched into it a dragon coiled around a column. The pose was familiar. The mark on its brow was more than familiar. It was the exact script now wound around my wrist. Laren spoke without turning around. Karos the Lost God. He said it flatly. The way you read a label you have read 100 times. Sealed in the Black Pine Wilds approximately 300 years ago. The current era considers it mythological. A story to frighten children who wandered too far west. I said nothing. I had my answer. Karos. That was the formal name, the one the plates and the professors used. I would never use it. To me it was the hatchling asleep in my bag, and calling it by a dead priesthood's title felt like calling a friend by his court records. Laren set down the plate he was holding. He turned, and he looked, not at my face, but at my wrist. The sleeve had ridden up. The mark showed. He looked at it for a long time. His expression did not change. That was the frightening part. There was no gasp, no widened eyes, nothing a lesser man would have given me. Just a slow, quiet recognition, like a man confirming a number he had already suspected. Come find me, he said, after the trial week. Not a demand. Not a threat. An appointment. He turned back to his plates as if the conversation had already ended, and somehow that calm was worse than any accusation could have been. He knew something. He might have guessed more than I wanted anyone to guess. And he was in no hurry at all, which meant he was certain I would still be here after trial week, and certain I would come. I left before he could decide to say more. Trial week began the next morning at the root board. Students picked their trial routes off a great map hung in the main hall, and the choosing told you everything about who thought they were. The elite route ran up the mountain, high difficulty, high reward, the path that made careers. Everyone with an A or B beast took it. KL took it first, of course, and his faction after him, stacking their names up the mountain like they were already at the summit. I studied the map. I picked the ravine. A murmur went through the hall. The ravine route was the low path, the safe path, the one you took if you were afraid. The coward's route, they called it. Low difficulty, low reward, barely worth the walk. Choosing it was as good as announcing you had already given up. Even his route is F grade, Kyle said, loud enough for the hall. His faction laughed on cue. I let them. Here is what the hall did not know. The ravine had a dragon heart ember vein running through its lower reaches, a rare demon-tainted mineral that drew corrupted creatures the way blood draws flies. The novel's final chapter had mentioned it in a single line, an aside about where the siege forces first gathered. It meant nothing to anyone in this world. It meant everything to me. The hatchling did not eat meat, did not eat grain, did not eat the tribute the Academy offered its beasts. It ate demon cores, and the ravine, the coward's route that made them laugh, was going to be full of them. I walked in alone. One other student had chosen the ravine too, gotten lost within the hour, and I did not go looking for him. The mist here was thinner than the wilds, but the wrongness was the same, and I followed the vein down by the heat that came off the stone. The other student who had chosen the ravine was somewhere behind me, lost, and I let him stay lost, which sounds colder than it was. He was in no danger on the upper path. The danger lived lower, where I was going, near the heat, and taking him with me would have meant explaining a hatchling that ate demon cores to a witness I had not chosen. I had enough witnesses. So I went down alone into the warmth of the ember vein, and the mist thinned. And the stone under my boots began to glow faintly orange at the seams, and I followed it the way you follow a smell you have read the description of but never breathed. The first tainted creature found me before midday. It came out of a side crevice, wrong-limbed and glowing sick orange at the joints, a beast that had gotten too close to the ember vein and been changed by it. In its chest, under the skin, I could see the core, a knot of dark light, the corruption's heart. The hatchling woke up. It climbed out of my satchel, walked down my arm, and looked at the tainted creature with the mild interest of a dog noticing a dropped scrap. Then it launched. It crossed the gap between us in one motion, and it did not fight the creature so much as unmake it. It bit into the chest, took the core out clean, and swallowed it the way a dog swallows a treat. Casual. No wasted motion. The tainted creature dissolved. Whatever had been holding its changed body together was in that core, and now the core was gone, and the body simply came apart into ash and settled on the stone. The hatchling licked its jaws and looked at me, expecting nothing, and climbed back up my arm to sleep. Far above me, in the Academy's main hall, the trial leaderboard was updating in real time, and I would learn later exactly what that had looked like. My name had been at the bottom, unranked, the F grade with the malfunction note, a curiosity nobody watched. Then a number appeared next to it. Purification points, 600 of them all at once, for the clean removal of a demon-tainted core, a score most students would not reach in the whole week. My name jumped the board, past the mid-ranks, past the B grades on the mountain. To third. The hall, I was told, went strange. Who is F grade? Someone said. Why does the F grade have 600 purification points? Kale's name still sat at the top. He still led. But the gap had closed in an afternoon, on the coward's route, and everyone in that hall had just watched it happen and had no way to explain it. I did not care about the ranking. I want that understood. The leaderboard was a tool, nothing more. A way to be visible enough that the academy could not quietly expel me, and invisible enough that no one looked too hard at how I scored. Third was almost too high. Third drew eyes. I had let the hatchling eat one core too many, and now the hall was asking questions I could not afford to answer. And I made a note to feed it more carefully after this, out of sight, on the low path where the cores were plentiful and the witnesses were not. I kept walking the vein. The path forked, and from the left fork came a sound I recognized, a beast panicking, and under it, a human voice trying not to. Darius fell. He had wandered off his own route, into the ravine's edge, and found a demon-touched beast his B-grade lizard could not handle. The lizard was backed against the rock, tail lashing, too frightened to fight and too cornered to run. Darius stood behind it with a short blade he clearly did not know how to use, and the tainted beast was gathering to spring. I could have kept walking. In the novel, Darius survived this on his own, barely, and carried the scar of it into the siege. But barely is a thin margin, and I did not want to gamble the vault doors on a lizard's nerve. I stepped into the fork. I put myself between Darius and the beast, and I felt the hatchling wake against my back. It looked at the demon-touched creature. The creature froze mid-crouch. Whatever was left of an animal's judgment in it recognized the small red thing on my shoulder and understood, the way the running scout had understood, the way the storm lion had understood. It backed away. It turned. It fled up the crevice it had come from, and the ravine was quiet. Darius lowered his blade. His hands were shaking. You saved me, he said. Don't make it weird, I said. You're useful later. He blinked. Useful for what? I did not answer. There was no answer I could give him that would not sound like madness. That in a book he had never read, in a siege that had not happened yet. In a version of the future that only existed behind my eyes, Darius Fell walked to a sealed vault under fire and opened 3 doors that saved 100 lives. He did not know he had it in him. He would not know for a long time. But a debt owed to a stranger who saves your life has a way of growing into the kind of courage a man does not know he is capable of, and I was planting it now. Early while it was cheap. I did not explain. I picked my way back to the main path and left him standing there in the fork with his frightened lizard and his short blade and a confusion that had, I noticed, entirely replaced the mockery from the courtyard. That was the point. In the novel, Darius Fell opened 3 restricted vault doors during the siege, and I needed him alive, and I needed him to owe me something he could not quite name. Debt is a better leash than fear. Fear runs out, debt just sits there and grows. Trial week ended 4 days later. The final leaderboard settled and I was in 4th, not 1st. I had spent my time feeding the hatchling and staying quiet, not chasing the score. Not last, not by a wide margin. 4th, the F grade with the malfunction note, 4 places below my brother and 100 questions above where anyone had expected me. It was exactly where I wanted to be, high enough to be undeniable, low enough that they still thought they understood me. I climbed out of the ravine on the last morning, tired, the hatchling heavy and full in my satchel, and there was a man standing at the bottom of the path. No students. No instructors. No audience, no announcement, no ceremony, just Professor Lauren, alone, in the gray morning light, waiting where the ravine met the road. He did not say anything at first. He just looked at me the way you look at something you have been searching for, a very long time, patient, certain, a little sad. Then he spoke. That was not luck, he said. Come with me. The anti-fog drill was supposed to be routine. The academy ran it every term. A sealed training jar of demon fog, cracked open inside a controlled test ring, and the students' beasts made to hold formation near the edge of it. The point was not to fight the fog. The point was to teach young tamers how their beasts would fail, because every beast fails against demon fog. It disrupts the bond resonance, scrambles the thread between tamer and creature, and a beast in the fog panics and breaks and runs. That is the lesson. You learn where your edge is so you do not find it by surprise in a real fight. The instructor opened the jar. Gray fog rolled out low across the test ring. Every beast in the class retreated. The lion cubs and the hunting cats and Darius Fell's B-grade lizard, all of them, drawn back to their owners' sides on instinct, hackles up, refusing the fog line. The instructor started to narrate it, the way he did every term. This resonance disruption is normal. The hatchling walked forward. It climbed out of my satchel, dropped to the ground, and crossed the ring toward the fog with the easy stride of a thing going to dinner. The instructor stopped mid-sentence. Nobody briefed. The hatchling reached the fog line, put its head down, and started to eat. It ate the fog the way it ate cores, casually, completely. The gray rolled toward its mouth and vanished, and the low cloud thinned and shrank, and in the space of a minute the test ring was clear. The hatchling finished, licked its jaws, walked back to the center of the ring, sat down, and yawned. A student near me whispered it out loud, because someone had to. Did it just eat the fog? I said nothing. That was going to be a problem. Not the fog eating. The fog eating was the most useful thing my beast could do in a world about to drown in that exact fog. The problem was the witnesses. A cave full of scouts, a leaderboard full of purification points, a parade full of bowing beasts, and now a whole class watching a hatchling clear a test ring that no beast in the current era could enter. Word travels. Word had already traveled. And somewhere at the far end of all that word was a demon lord scout who would eventually hear that a tamer in the Western Academy had a beast that ate the fog. And would want to know why. I collected the hatchling and did not answer the questions. Here is the thing about witnesses. Each one is a small leak, and small leaks do not matter until they meet. A scout in a cave, a crowd at a parade, a leaderboard, a class at a drill, on their own, each was a story that could be laughed off, a rumor a noble house could bury. But they were all leaking toward the same sea, and somewhere out past the edge of the map, in the dark the demons listened from, those leaks were going to pool into a single shape. A tamer in the west, a beast that eats the fog. 3 marks nobody can read. I could not stop the leaking. All I could do was move faster than the pool could fill, and reach the other 2 seals before the thing at the bottom of the dark decided to come and look at me itself. Professor Laren's review room was small and buried and full of the same old reference plates from the registry, stacked on every surface. He had brought me here after the ravine and told me nothing, and now, after the drill, he sent for me again. He did not ask me to explain the fog. He did not ask me anything. Instead, he laid 3 things on the table between us. First, the etching. Karos, the lost god, the dragon, and the column. The mark on its brow that matched the mark on my wrist. He set it down and did not comment. Second, a record on cracked vellum, 300 years old. He read it aloud, slow. A sealed legendary beast cannot be bonded by a tamer holding fewer than 3 empty slots. The vessel must be wholly empty to receive what was wholly sealed. Third, a census plate. He turned it toward me. This is every tamer in recorded history who reached 0 contracts voluntarily, he said. The plate was blank. There are none. Nobody empties themselves on purpose. It is the one thing a tamer is taught, from the first day, never to do. He let the 3 things sit there. 3 slots, he said. Stolen from you. On your birthday. And within a day you walk out of the Black Pine Wilds with a beast wearing a 300-year-old seal mark on your wrist. He folded his hands. Do you understand what I am saying to you? I understood it, I said, before my father signed the paper. Laren was quiet for a long moment. You should not have survived the wilds, he said. No one survives the wilds. Certainly not a tamer with nothing. The original Aaron didn't. I did not plan to say it. It came out flat and true, and I watched Lauren hear it, hear the whole shape of what I was not saying, the impossibility folded inside those 4 words. The original Aaron didn't survive the wilds, so who walked out of them? He did not push. That was the measure of the man. A lesser scholar would have grabbed my wrist and demanded the truth. Laren simply looked at me and understood that some questions cost more to ask than the answer is worth and closed the file. I am going to pretend this conversation did not happen, he said. I would advise you to pretend the same. I left. Through the door, before it shut, I saw him sit back down at the table, alone, with the 3 plates in front of him and his hands folded, thinking. He would not report me, but he would watch. And a man like Laren, watching, was the closest thing to an ally I was going to get. The duel came 2 days later. The main courtyard, at the busiest hour, students and instructors, and a scatter of visiting nobility all crossing between classes. Kale chose the time deliberately. He walked into the center of it and called me out in front of everyone, and his pretext was clean enough to force my hand. You cheated your trial route, he said. The ravine. An F grade does not score 600 purification points. I formally challenge your trial standing. Academy rules allowed it. A student could challenge another's trial score, and the challenge was settled by a one-on-one beast display in front of witnesses. Kale expected me to refuse and confirm the cheating, or accept and be humiliated. He had thought about the trap. He had not thought hard enough. I accept, I said. He called the storm lion. It came to the center of the courtyard, my old beast, mane bright, muscles rolling, everything a top-tier war beast should be. The crowd made the sound crowds make. Kale stood beside it with his hand raised, ready to command, certain of the outcome, and I understood that he wanted this to be a slaughter in front of the nobles. I called the hatchling. It padded out and sat down in the dust across from the storm lion, a dog-sized red thing beside a war beast twice its height, and the crowd laughed and Kale smiled. I want to be clear about what I was risking. If the storm lion had obeyed him, if the bond between them had run deeper than the years it had spent as mine, I had no answer. The hatchling would not fight. I had no weapon. I would have stood in that courtyard and been mauled in front of the nobles. And KL would have won cleanly, and every league I had been racing would have pooled into the story of an F grade who got what he deserved. I had read the beast's loyalty in a book. Books are not the same as a war beast, 3 feet away with its master shouting. I made myself hold still and trust a page. He gave the storm lion its command. Attack. I said nothing. I only exhaled, a slow breath out, the kind you let go when a thing is about to resolve, and the sound of it carried across the quiet courtyard. The storm lion's ears flattened. It heard me. My breath, my presence, the memory of a hand it had known for years, and its head turned away from KL, away from the command, toward me. It took one step in my direction, and then, in front of the nobles, in front of the instructors, in front of its own new master, the storm lion knelt. Not to KL. Well. It lowered its great head to the dust and would not rise, and no command Kyle gave moved it, because a beast will refuse many things, but it will not attack the tamer it still loves. There was no fight. There was nothing to see but a war beast kneeling to the wrong man. And it was worse than any beating I could have given Kyle, because everyone understood exactly what it meant and no one could say it out loud. KL stood frozen, humiliated in a way that had no rule to cover it. The instructor cleared his throat and called it a draw, citing beast behavioral anomaly, and I turned and walked out of the courtyard without a word to my brother. That was the cruelest part, and I knew it. I gave him nothing to push against. An hour later, I learned what Kale did with his humiliation. The registration board carried a new notice, and my name was on it. A formal complaint, filed under Rule 14, unauthorized possession of an unclassified beast with evidence of legendary root contamination, filed by Kale Vare. I read it in the hallway with the hatchling asleep in my bag. He had learned. That was the thing to respect in it. You do not beat someone like me with a fist, and the Storm Lion had just taught him that in front of the whole academy. You beat someone like me with a form. If the complaint held, I lost my student status, my travel permit, everything. And I was transferred to the Tamer Council's custody, which was a very deep and quiet room I could not afford to be in, with a demon seal cracking in 58 hours. He was trying to trap me in a room. I folded the notice and put it in my pocket, and I thought about that. He was trying to trap me in a room. But I had read this book. I already knew which rooms I was allowed to be trapped in, and which ones would kill me, and the council's custody was the second kind, so I would simply not go there. The complaint opened a 72-hour response window. I filed my response that afternoon. 1 page. No argument, no outrage, no accusation. Just a factual statement that the scanner had malfunctioned during registration, that classification was pending manual review, that the beast's grade was, on the Academy's own record, FF. I attached the registrar's incident report. Her own paperwork said malfunction. I simply agreed with it. You cannot prove legendary contamination against a beast the Academy has officially filed as broken equipment. Then I went back to studying maps. He was trying to trap me in a room. I had already chosen the ones I could survive. The elite class offer arrived the next morning, and it caught me off guard because it was real. Not from KL. From the instructor committee, formally on their own initiative. The Academy's elite tamer class, the top 15 students, and they were inviting the F grade with the malfunction note because the leaderboard did not lie and neither did the ravine. It was earned. Under any other circumstances, it would have been the thing to want. I knew from the novel exactly what the elite class did. It locked you to a supervised curriculum. It restricted your travel passes. It assigned you to missions sponsored by noble houses, on their schedule, in their direction. It was a cage made of prestige, and I needed to be able to move. I had 2 more sealed beasts to reach, and a clock running against me, and no time to sit in a supervised classroom, being groomed for a house that had already thrown me out once. I wrote back 1 word. Declined. The instructor who had delivered the letter found me and did not hide his confusion. You could have your house sponsorship restored, he said. You understand what you are turning down? A career. I don't need a house, I said. I need a travel permit. I filed for a travel research permit instead. The independent student kind. Obscure. Buried in the rulebook. Rarely used because it came with no prestige and no sponsor and no protection. It came with exactly one thing. The right to move freely through the low-ranked dungeon zones without a supervisor asking where I was going. That was all I wanted from the Academy. Not a career. A key to the door. The instructor left disappointed, and I understood his disappointment. From where he stood, I was a talented boy throwing away the one ladder the Academy offered. He could not see the 2 sealed doors waiting for me, or the clock in the far sky, or the shape of a demon lord's return that lived only in my memory of a book. He saw a career refused. I saw a cage declined. We were both right, from where we stood, and there was no way to bridge the distance without telling him things that would land me in the council's quiet room faster than any of Kale's forms could. Because I was not done with the wilds. Not even close. I had 1 dragon. 2 more seals were waiting, and 58 hours until the demon lord's first sign cracked the sky. The elite class would have given me a career. What I needed was a map. The cafeteria served meat that night, and I watched it not work. Every student's beast ate. The cats and the lizards and the birds crowded the feeding troughs, and the hall filled with the ordinary sound of animals being fed. The hatchling sat in my lap and ignored all of it. It would not touch meat. It would not touch grain. Everything the academy offered its beasts was, to this thing, not food. I had planned for that. Before dinner, I had gone to the market and bought a sack of low-grade demon cores, the cheap kind, harvested from minor tainted vermin, worthless to anyone who did not have a beast that ate them. I slid one under the table into my palm and passed it down. The hatchling took it out of my hand, quiet, and swallowed it, and settled. At the next table, Darius Fell watched. He had been watching for days, not mocking anymore, cataloging. I saw him note the sack, the core, the way the hatchling refused the trough. He was building a picture of me, piece by piece, and I let him. A man who owes you and is trying to understand you is a man staying close, and close was where I wanted him. The next morning I went to the Ashbird market. It sat outside the eastern gate, in the mud, where the city sold the beasts it had given up on. Broken contracts. Cracked cocoons. Defective hatchlings that would never grade. Animals with something wrong in them sold cheap to people who could not afford anything right. I walked the stalls slow, and I found what I had come for near the back. A black cocoon, cracked down one side, tagged in a board hand. Ash bird egg. Status dormant. Non-viable. The seller wanted almost nothing for it, because a non-viable egg is a rock you have to carry. I knew what it was. The novel had named it in passing. A dusk falcon, a rare reconnaissance beast that never hatches under ordinary conditions because it needs demon fog resonance to break its shell. And this world had almost no demon fog, and so its eggs had been going dormant and getting sold as garbage for generations. It was not non-viable. It was waiting for a world that was about to arrive. I needed eyes in the air for what was coming. I paid the scrap price, put the cocoon in my pack, and did not explain it to the seller or to Darius or to anyone. The team exam notice went up that afternoon. 1. Mandatory. Groups of 4, each assigned a dungeon sector, graded on survival and points. My group was drawn, me, 2 mid-rank students I barely knew, and Darius Fell, who saw the assignment and came to find me with an expression caught between relief and dread. I spent the night before the exam preparing, and my team thought I had lost my nerve. I bound anti-fog herbs into small bundles, demon grade, the kind that burns a normal man's lungs but blunts the resonance scramble of the fog. I carved exit markers to leave on the walls. I wrote out the paths, the ones the novel's exam group had taken, and which of those paths had gotten them killed. Because there was a scene coming, I was almost sure of it. The exam was too clean an opportunity for Kale to pass up. "Why are you doing all this?" one of the mid-rank students asked, watching me carve markers. "It's a C-rank exam. We walk in, we get points, we walk out." "Because it's a graded exam," I said, "and I'd rather not fail." They did not believe me. They took the herb bundles anyway. People always take the bundles. The dungeon sector was ordinary at first, standard monster density, the kind of thing a C-rank exam is built around, and my team started to relax and think I had been paranoid. I did not relax. I counted turns and watched the walls and waited for the scene I had read. It came at the midpoint. The corridor opened into a chamber, and the thing waiting in it was not on any C-rank roster. A demon-tier creature, unregistered, wrong for the dungeon by 3 whole ranks, something that should not have been within a mile of a student exam. Someone had put it there. Someone had planted it, in a sealed grade, in the path of a specific team, and I did not have to guess whose team. My group scattered. That was the mistake, and it was the natural mistake, and it was exactly what the creature wanted. One student ran and got pinned against a wall. Another bolted the wrong way and got cut off in a side passage. Darius froze. The demon-tier creature swung its head, searching, and I saw how it searched. By sound. Not sight. It navigated by sound. I had read this scene. I knew the one thing that mattered about this creature, and it was that it was blind and it hunted the noise its prey made in its panic. "Stop moving," I said, low and flat. "All of you, stop moving, stop talking. Breathe through your noses, now." They stopped. Even panicking, they stopped, because the flatness of my voice was more frightening than the creature. The demon-tier thing swung its blind head across the chamber, listening for the screaming it expected, and found 4 people holding their breath. It cycled past the pinned student, past Darius, past me, hunting a sound that had gone silent. I moved my team by hand. No voice. I used the written signals I had carved into the markers the night before, simple shapes pressed into a palm: here, there, wait, go. I walked them one at a time along the wall toward the corridor, guiding them by touch through a room with a blind demon in it, and the creature never found the sound it was looking for because we never gave it one. Then I turned it toward the weak point. The demon-tier thing projected a pocket of fog around itself, a defensive cloud, and inside that cloud, at its center, was the core. No student weapon was reaching through that fog, but the hatchling woke against my back, and it did what it does. It went into the fog. It ate the fog, cut a clean channel straight through the defensive cloud, and left the core exposed and undefended in the sudden clear air. I took the core out with my knife. The demon-tier creature dissolved around it, blind and silent to the end, and the chamber went quiet, and 4 students stood against the wall breathing hard and alive. The instructor's report, when it came, was careful. Extraordinary circumstances. An unregistered hostile of unusual grade. Team Veyer survived without injury, no blame assigned, no cause identified, officially. The academy did not want to say out loud that someone had planted a demon in a student exam, because saying it out loud raised the question of who, and the answer had a noble house attached. The 2 mid-rank students had no such caution. By nightfall the whole academy had a version of the story, and the version was, Aaron soloed a demon boss with a trash dragon. It was not accurate, but it was close enough, and it traveled fast. Ihil heard it. His face, I was told, did not change at all when he heard it. That was worse than rage. Rage would have meant I had surprised him. The still face meant he had planted the creature himself, and he had heard that it failed, and he was already thinking about the next thing. Darius told a different version, and his was the one that scared people. The dragon ate the fog, he said, and Aaron never even raised his voice. Somehow the calm was more terrifying than the solo. A man who kills a demon by shouting is brave. A man who does it by lowering his voice is something else. I used the momentum before it faded. Academy rules let students form survey groups with 2 members and a chartered group carried legal travel passes to every C-rank zone and below, no supervisor required. I filed the papers that week and named it the Wild Survey Group. Darius joined, he owed me, and he had stopped pretending otherwise. 1 other student joined out of pure curiosity about the fog-eating dragon. 2 members. Charter granted. And with it, the freedom to walk into any low-rank dungeon in the region and call it research. A Veyer House elder, visiting the academy that day on other business, noticed the filing. I saw him notice. I filed it away with everything else and did not slow down. The Ashblood Mine was a C-rank dungeon 2 days travel out, flooded in its lower levels, and I led the survey group into it with a purpose none of them could see. The upper floors were routine. We took a few points, made it look like research, and I brought us down. 2 floors below the floodline, in a submerged subchamber, the dungeon board had posted a warning I had come a long way to ignore. Sealed gate? Do not approach. It stood underwater at the far end of the chamber, an iron gate gone black with age, and across it hung the same kind of compressed aura seal I had walked through in the wilds. My team read the warning and stopped. I did not. Wait here, I said. Both of you, whatever you hear, wait here. Darius opened his mouth to argue and closed it. He had learned that much. I waited to the gate and I held out my wrist. 2 empty slots. 1 dragon mark, 1 hollow, 1 hollow. The gate read them. That was the whole mechanic, the same as the cave. The seal was not built to keep the strong out, it was built to open for a specific kind of tamer. One carrying exactly what I carried, open slots that asked instead of took. The aura across the iron flickered. Then the water began to drain inward, pulled through the opening gate into the chamber beyond, and the seal parted, and I walked down alone into the dark. The chamber below was dry and old and deep. Coiled in the deepest part of it was the second one. Not as ancient as the god dragon. I could feel that at once, a younger and rawer thing. Serpentine, massive, blue-black scales that drank what little light there was, and along its spine ran veins of silver lightning that pulsed slow, on and off, like a heartbeat you could see. Its eyes were shut, and it was hungry. The moment the gate opened and the outside touched it, it woke, and the hunger came off it in waves, a starving, restless, quick thing that had been sealed with its appetite intact. I held out my wrist. The bond was nothing like the first. The god dragon had considered me for 3 long seconds, weighed and inventoried and chosen. This one did not consider. It read the open slot, and it moved, fast, like water finding the low place, and it poured into the empty slot before I had finished offering it. Immediate. Total. A second mark burned onto my wrist beside the first, a different script, tangled and branching, like a fork of lightning frozen mid-strike. It collapsed to hatchling form as it bonded. Smaller than the god dragon, sleeker, built for speed, blue-black scales, silver eyes, a restless whip of a tail that never quite stopped moving. It was on my shoulder before I understood it had moved, and it was already looking for the next thing to eat. 2 floors up and a chamber over, I would learn, the god dragon hatchling had gone still at the exact moment the bond completed. It lifted its head, looked toward the sealed gate through 2 floors of stone, held that look for 1 second. And then went back to eating the core in front of it, satisfied, as if it had felt a brother arrive and found the news unremarkable. And I felt something as the second mark settled beside the first, a hint of the thing I had never told anyone, the reason I had come. 2 marks on 1 wrist should have sat separately, 2 contracts held by 1 tamer, no more connected than any 2 beasts a person might own. They did not sit separately, they leaned toward each other. There was a pull between them, faint but real, like two halves of a broken thing recognizing the break. The novel had a word for that pull, buried in its last pages, and I would not let myself think the word yet. Not with one slot still empty, not until all three were home. But I felt the pull, standing in the drained dark with lightning cooling on my wrist, and it told me the book had not lied about the biggest thing of all. I climbed back up through the draining chamber and out through the gate. Darius was waiting at the floodline, exactly where I had left him, pale and rigid. "What was in there?" he said. It was not really a question. "What was down there, Aaron?" I held up my wrist. 2 contract marks now, the ancient script of the first, and beside it the tangled lightning of the second. Darius stared at them like a man reading a sentence he could not finish. I had already chosen the name on the walk-up. The novel never gave this one a name. It was a footnote, a sealed thing behind a gate. The original story never opened, because the original Aaron died before he ever reached it. That made the name mine to give. Kareth, I said. I'm calling it Kareth. I do not know exactly where the name came from. It was not in the book. The book had never opened this gate, never named this beast, never let the original Aaron live long enough to reach a drowned chamber in a C-rank mine. That was the strange gift of walking off the map. For the first time since I had woken in this world, I was standing somewhere the author had never written, holding something the story had never described, and the naming of it was mine and no one else's. Klickagarath. It felt right in my mouth, quick and sharp, like the thing it belonged to. Darius did not ask what it meant. He had stopped asking me what things meant. He just wrote it down in whatever ledger he kept behind his eyes, and followed me back up toward the light. I had 2 of them now, 1 slot left. 1 more seal, 1 more dragon, and the mechanic I had read about in the novel's final chapter. The thing I had never told anyone, the reason the 3 of them were sealed apart in the first place, would finally be complete. I had 41 hours before the Demon Lord's first seal cracked the sky. And somewhere out on the survival island in a volcanic crater the Academy did not know it was sitting on, the 3rd one was already trying to break out on its own. The Academy's investigation unit caught the saboteur 4 days after the exam. He was an unregistered mercenary, the kind of man hired to be forgotten, and he had made the mistake of staying in the region to collect the second half of his payment. The disciplinary room where they held him was small and bright and cold, and I was allowed to be present because the demon planted in that dungeon had been planted in my team's path. And the Academy, whatever else it was, still followed its own procedure. I had known he would be caught. The novel mentioned it in a single line, buried in the middle of a chapter. A mercenary picked up outside the eastern gate, a testimony that named the house elder, a scandal the Veyer family smothered before it reached the council. In the book, the original Aaron was already 3 years dead by then, and the testimony was about a different plot against a different target, and it went nowhere. This time it was about me. I had made sure to be in the building when they brought him in. He talked fast. Men like him always do, once the money stops being worth the silence. He named his employer, and it was not the name the Academy expected, not KL. Elder Torvan Veyer, a house elder older than my father, the man who managed the things the family did not want its heirs' hands on. The mercenary had been hired to place a demon-tier creature in a C-rank exam sector, in the path of Team Veyer, and to make it look like a dungeon anomaly. The recording crystal in the corner captured all of it, every word, the elder's name spoken plainly into the light. It proved the thing everyone had suspected, and no one had wanted to say. The demon in the exam had not wandered in. It had been placed there to kill me, and to kill the 3 students standing next to me, and to write it up as bad luck. They gave me a copy of the testimony. I sat and listened to the whole recording through once. I did not look surprised. I had read the shape of this before it happened. And I noticed, listening, that I did not feel what I was supposed to feel. No shock, no fresh wound. What I felt was closer to satisfaction, because a recording of a noble house arranging a murder is a very valuable thing to be holding, and I had just been handed one for free. There was a thing I noticed about myself, listening to that recording, that I did not entirely like. 3 months in this world, and I had stopped being surprised by cruelty. The first Aaron would have wept, maybe, hearing that his own house had paid a stranger to feed him to a demon. I just filed it. I catalogued the elder's voice, the price he paid. The way he spoke of me like a line item to be removed, and I felt only the cold satisfaction of a man who had been handed a better card than he expected. I wondered, briefly, whether the knowledge in my head was worth what it was doing to whatever heart I had inherited. Then I put that thought in a drawer too, because sentiment and survival cannot share a room, and I had 38 hours. In the novel, Elder Torvan Veyer died in the demon attack, cut down in the chaos of the first siege because nobody in the house knew what was coming and nobody warned him. I had not decided yet whether to let that happen. It was strange to hold a man's life like that, a thing I could spend or save. I put the recording in my pocket and let the question stay open. The Academy expected me to file charges. Everyone did. A noble house had tried to murder a student. The grounds were airtight, the recording was clean, and the investigator laid it out for me like a gift. You have every basis for a formal house complaint, he said. Full compensation. A public censure of houseware. Keep the file open, I said. Don't close it, don't file anything, just keep it open. He stared at me. You're declining to press charges? Against the people who tried to kill you? I'm declining to press them today. I walked out with the recording in my pocket and left him holding a case he could not understand why I would not use. He followed me a few steps into the corridor. At least let me reinstate your contracts through the court, he said. You were wronged. The law would give them back. I stopped and looked at him. He meant it kindly. That was the trouble with kind men who did not know the shape of the board. They kept trying to hand me back the very thing I had needed to lose. I don't want them back, I said. I never want them back. Close nothing. Ask for nothing. Just keep the file breathing. He did not understand, and I did not have time to teach him, so I left. Here was the arithmetic he did not have. Charging the Veyer house now would open a formal hearing, and a noble house hearing in this world took 6 months at the fastest, 6 months of depositions and countersuits and elders closing ranks. I did not have 6 months, I had 38 hours. The recording, spent now, bought me a lawsuit I would not live to finish. Kept in my pocket, unspent, it bought me something better, a leash. As long as I held it and did not use it, the Veyer house had to wonder every single day whether today was the day I used it. A lawsuit is a weapon you fire once. A recording you refuse to file is a weapon you get to point forever. My father came to the academy that evening. No announcement. No escort. He appeared in the guest wing and made his way to my dormitory door and knocked. And when I opened it, Lord Veyer was standing in the hall looking like a man who had rehearsed something and forgotten it on the way up the stairs. He had brought 2 things. A formal house reinstatement document, sealed and signed, ready to make me a Veyer again. And beneath it, 3 folded contracts. My 3 original beasts, the Storm Lion and the Silver Hawk and the Ember Fox, which Kale was supposedly willing to return to me as a gesture of the family's goodwill. That last part was a lie. I knew it the way I knew the mark on my wrist. Kale would sooner burn the contracts than hand them back, and my father knew it too, which meant my father was standing in my doorway offering me something he did not have. I looked at the 3 folded contracts and felt nothing move in me at all. That surprised me a little. 3 weeks ago the sight of them being torn from my wrist had been the worst moment of a life I had inherited. Now they were paper. The Storm Lion had bowed to a thing on my shoulder in the middle of a parade. The Silver Hawk had left Kale's arm to watch it. Whatever these contracts were worth on the day they were stolen, the market had moved, and my father was arriving with an old price on a thing I had already sold. Come home, he said. Kale overstepped. I have spoken to the elders. The house will correct it, all of it, and this, he lifted the reinstatement paper, makes it as though the ceremony never happened. I studied him in the doorway before I answered. This was the man who had signed my discharge without reading it, and now he had read something. Read the parade, and the leaderboard, and the whispers, and whatever the elders were saying behind closed doors about the disgraced son who kept turning up impossible. He had read enough to be afraid. It had taken fear to move him. Not love, not guilt, not principle. Fear of what I was becoming had done what none of the softer things ever could, and had carried him up the guest wing stairs alone in the dark with a lie in his hands. KL was not with him. KL did not know he was here. That was the whole of it right there if my father had been able to see it. He had come alone and in secret to undo a thing he had done in front of 2 rows of elders, and he had come not because he was sorry but because he was afraid. I looked at the documents on his outstretched hands. Then I looked at my own wrist. 2 contract marks now, the ancient script and the tangled lightning, gold that did not fade. Then I looked at my father's face. I took the papers, I put them on the small table by the door. And I slid them back toward him, unopened. Those contracts are worth less than nothing to me now, I said. You should understand that before you offer them again. And Kyle didn't overstep, he did exactly what you built him to do. You raised him to take, and you raised me to be the thing he took from, and then you signed the paper without reading it. That wasn't a mistake. That was the design working. Aaron. Thank you, I said, for the empty slots, I needed them. I couldn't have gotten there any other way, and I would never have chosen it myself, so thank you. Really. He had no answer for that. There is no answer for that. I held the door open, and I waited, and after a long moment my father took his papers and stepped back into the hall. He looked smaller out there than he had at the center of the ceremony room, smaller than the man who had signed my life away without a second glance. The hallway light was not kind to him. He did not look like a lord. He looked like an old man who had come to buy back something he had thrown out for free and found the price had changed. He left. I closed the door, and I stood with my hand on it for a while, listening to his footsteps go, and I will not pretend it was nothing. He was still my father, in whatever way a borrowed life allows. Some part of the boy whose body I wore had loved that man and wanted him to be better than he was. I let that part feel what it needed to feel for exactly as long as the footsteps lasted. Then they faded, and I let it go, because feeling and planning cannot occupy the same room, and I had 37 hours. I sat down at the table where his papers had been, and I looked at the recording in my hand, and I thought about leashes. And I thought about the survival island, and I did not think about my father again that night. KL learned about the visit the next day. I was not there for it, but the shape of it reached me the way everything in that house eventually reached me. A servant told him, in the corridor of the Veyer estate, that his father had gone to the academy alone, in secret, carrying a reinstatement document and 3 contracts, to bring Aaron home. KL went very still. That was the whole scene: a hallway, a servant, and my brother's face going quiet in a way that had nothing to do with anger. Because KL did not want me back. KL wanted to win, and winning meant me gone, disgraced, forgotten, and every move he had made, the theft, the complaint, the demon and the exam, had been aimed at making me smaller. He had prepared for all of my responses. He had never once prepared for his own father to lose his nerve and try to negotiate. That was the first real crack in him. Not the storm lion kneeling, not the leaderboard, not the failed demon in the exam. Those were humiliations, and KL could absorb humiliation. This was different. This was the moment he understood that the man who had built him, the father who had signed the ceremony and handed him everything, was now afraid. Afraid of what Aaron was becoming, afraid enough to go behind his own heir's back to make peace with it. If our father was frightened, then the thing he was frightened of was real, and KL had made it himself. I had 3 things now, and I laid them out in my head the way I laid out everything. A recording of a noble house arranging my murder, kept in my pocket, unspent, worth more as a threat than a verdict. A father who had finally looked me in the eyes and flinched, and would flinch again. And 37 hours before the Demon Lord's first seal cracked the sky over a world that did not know it was coming. The survival island departure was in 32 hours. The 3rd seal was already breaking on its own, out there in the volcanic dark, eroding from the inside faster than the academy calendar knew. Everyone else was going to that island for a mandatory survival exercise, 3 days on classified ground, a grade and a ledger. I was going to be early. The academy dropped 10 of us onto the island at dawn and left. Survival event. 3 days on classified ground, groups of 10, and your grade was simple: walk off the island alive with points. Most of the students I landed with stayed near the beach, where the drop boats had left them, clustering the way frightened people cluster. The island did not encourage staying. It was volcanic black stone, cracked and steaming, sulfur venting from fissures and long yellow plumes, and the whole place sat heavy under a demon-thick air that pressed on the back of the throat. I had signed up for this island on purpose, not this term's grade, this place. The novel had a 3rd sealed site here, in the interior, in a crater the academy had been running survival exams around for years without ever knowing what it circled. I separated from my assigned group the moment our boots hit the stone. I had a route in my head and no time to argue it. They called after me. The rules said stay together, the grade depended on the group, and I did not turn around. A grade meant nothing to me. I had turned down the elite class and an entire career for the freedom to walk away from exactly this kind of instruction. And I was not going to spend that freedom huddling on a beach for a number in a ledger. Let them mark me absent. Let them fail the survey group's founder for abandoning his team. There was a god sealed in the middle of this island, and its seal was already breaking, and I had less than 30 hours. The god dragon hatchling rode my shoulder. Bigger now than when it had bonded, noticeably bigger, growing at a rate that was starting to concern me, and Kareth was coiled tight around my forearm, silver eyes half-lidded, restless as ever. And in my pack, the black cocoon I had bought for scrap in the mud outside the eastern gate had begun to move. The demon fog here was thicker than anything this world usually held. The cocoon felt it. It vibrated against my spine as I climbed. 2 hours into the interior, I reached the crater. It was old, and it was sealed, but the seal was failing. The same compressed aura material as the cave and the gate, but cracked across its whole face, leaking a sulfur-orange light through fractures that ran deep. Something had been eroding it from the inside for a very long time, pushing, wearing it thin. The 3rd seal was nearly broken on its own. I had not come a moment early. I had come exactly in time. I walked to the crater's edge and held out my wrist. 1 empty slot. 2 marks beside it. The ancient script, the tangled lightning, and 1 hollow left, the last room in the house, open and waiting. From inside the crater, something rose to meet it. A shape made of compressed ash and orange light, bird-like, vast, wings folded against the body that had spent decades pressed into a space too small for it. The Ash Phoenix. It had been trying to break out for years, and the moment my open slot came near the failing seal, the last of the aura ruptured all at once. It came out of the crater. Full form, wingspan twice the crater's diameter, ash and embers trailing from every feather edge like a thing on fire that could not be consumed. The heat of it rolled over me, and the island lit orange, and I did not step back. There was no negotiation. The god dragon had inventoried me for 3 seconds. Kareth had poured in like water. This one did neither. The instant its shape cleared the crater, the bond completed in a single burst. A flare of light that whited out the whole sky, and the phoenix collapsed inward mid-air the way the others had, folding down from a titan into something I could carry. It landed on my shoulder. The size of a large crow now, ash-gray feathers, each one tipped with a slow orange glow like a banked coal. Remarkably calm, calmer than either of the others, no restlessness in it at all. It turned its head, looked at me with steady dark eyes, and pressed the side of its head against my jaw. A nuzzle. After decades trying to claw its way out of a crater, it settled onto my shoulder and leaned into me like it had been mine all along. The god dragon and Kareth both turned to look at the new arrival, neither moved toward it. They simply regarded it, the way you regard family arriving late to a house you all already share, and then went back to what they were doing. That was the moment I felt the thing I had read about and never quite believed. With the third slot filled, the three of them settled into something. Not a formation, not a chain of command, but a resonance, a low harmony running between the marks on my wrist that had not been there with only two. They were not three beasts I happened to hold, they fit. They fit the way three notes fit into a chord, and the chord was older than any of them, and I was the string it was being played on. I did not understand yet what the chord was for. I only knew that the instant it completed, something a very long way away went quiet and turned to listen. 3 contract marks on my wrist, 3 different scripts, 3 languages nobody in this world could read. The last slot, full. And in my pack, the cocoon hatched. The phoenix's eruption did it. The burst of demon-touched fire was the resonance. The dusk falcon's shell had been dormant for generations waiting to feel. The cracked black egg split, and a wet, matted, sticky chick pushed its way out into the orange light, blinking, ugly, alive. It looked up at the phoenix on my shoulder and made a small, thin sound, and the phoenix looked back down at it, unbothered. My reconnaissance beast. My eyes in the air, hatched by a god breaking out of a mountain. I would let it dry and learn its wings later. For now, I tucked it against my chest. 3. I had all 3. Every slot full of something that had been sealed away for centuries, waiting for a tamer empty enough to hold it. Whatever came in the next 30 hours, whatever the demon lord's cracking seal brought down on this world, at least I was not empty anymore. I would never be empty again. I turned back toward the extraction point, and I crossed paths with Scion Aldrace. I knew him at once. Noble air, silver-blooded, the face the novel had built its whole spine around. Scion Aldrace was the original protagonist, the chosen hero, the one the story was supposed to follow, the boy destined to unite the tamers of the world against the demon lord. I knew his entire arc. I knew his triumphs and his allies and the exact moment, in the second siege where he died with his beast in his hand, and the war turned dark for a generation. He did not know any of it. He knew only that he was strong, and that rumors had been coming off the Western Academy about a fog-eating dragon and a tamer who killed demons by lowering his voice. He challenged me. Of course he did. That was in his blood, the reflex to test the strong thing that appeared in his path. His beast was a weapon. Legendary tier, rare beyond rare, it manifested not as an animal but as a sword, a long blade of pale light that settled into his hand as if it had grown there. My hatchlings do not fight. That is not what they are, and no command would have made them draw against Scion. So I faced his weapon beast unarmed, and I did the only thing I could do, which was the one thing I knew about it from the book. The weapon beast hesitated before a critical strike. It mirrored its tamer, and Scion, for all his strength, hesitated. A flaw so deep he did not know he had it, a half-beat of doubt before every killing blow. The beast carried that doubt in its edge. I pressed in. I moved to the very limit of the blade's range and I waited there, in the danger, and I watched Scion's shoulders, and when the strike finally came, it came a half-beat late, exactly as I had read. I stepped inside it, not to win. I could not win, I had no weapon and no beast that would fight. To prove. And as I came inside the blade's arc, the aura pouring off 3 legendary contracts on my wrist scorched across the back of Scion's gauntlet, blackening the metal. And he felt it, and he understood that whatever I was, it was not something he could measure. He stepped back. He did not speak, and in his face I saw the thing that made me decide, in that moment, to try to save him rather than let the novel have him. It was not fear. Scion Aldrace was not afraid of me. It was recognition. The look of a man who has spent his whole life being told he is the most important person in the room, suddenly meeting someone who knows something he does not, and being humble enough to notice. Most heroes would have doubled down. Scion went quiet and thought. That was why the novel had chosen him, and why the novel had killed him, because a man who thinks that way walks into the second siege believing he can reason with a thing that only understands slaughter. You don't have to die in the climax, I said. That was the novel's ending. It doesn't have to be yours. He stared at me. He had no idea what I meant. Climax, novel, none of it, and I did not explain. I walked away and left him standing on the black stone with a scorched gauntlet and a sentence he would not be able to stop turning over. 2 hours before extraction, the assassins were waiting on my return path. 6 of them. Professional, a mercenary group, not academy students, and not a beast duel. These came with weapons and poison traps and the flat patience of men paid to end someone. They had set up along the exact route I would take back to the drop point, which meant they had my route, which meant someone had leaked my island sign-in sheet. KL had a contact in academy administration. I had suspected it. Now, I was certain. My hatchlings are not weapons. They will not fight on command, and I would not have asked. But they are legendary, and that is a different kind of force. The god dragon hatchling fixed its gold eyes on the mercenary leader, and for the first time, the man did not break. He had been briefed. Someone had told him exactly what rode on my shoulder, and exactly what it did to a man who met its eyes, and he had come ready for it. He shut his eyes. He set his jaw. And he kept coming, giving his orders by feel, refusing to look at the thing that had frozen everyone before it. The glance that had stopped a running scout and bowed a storm lion slid off a professional who simply would not meet it. So I stopped waiting for the stare to save me. I moved first. I broke the demon-grade anti-fog herbs I carried. The ones that blunt a beast's resonance, but sear a normal man's lungs. And I flung them into the wind coming off the vents, and while the 6 of them choked and their eyes streamed, Kareth came off my forearm faster than any of them could track. Silver lightning, low to the stone, cutting between them. It did not kill. That is not what it is. But it knocked blades from hands and put men on the ground, and I used the terrain. The vents and the fissures and the sulfur plumes, and I took the 6 of them down one at a time, while their blinded leader swung at a shape he could not fix on. It was not clean, and it was not merciful, but it was fast, and when it was done, the leader was the last one standing. I stopped in front of him. "Who sent you?" I said. He was too frightened of the dragon to lie. He gave me the name, and it was the name I expected, threaded up through the administration contact to my brother. I nodded. That confirmed the leak and the leash both. "Tell your employer," I said, "that I kept the recording." I knocked him unconscious and left him on the stone for the Academy's extraction team to find. Let them puzzle over 6 mercenaries on a student island. Let KL hear that his men had failed and that I knew, again, exactly who had sent them. I was walking away when the leader stirred. He was not as unconscious as I had left him. Or, the fear had burned it out of him faster, and he lifted his head off the stone and got out one sentence before he went under for good. "The commander knows your face." I stopped walking. I had not expected that. I turned it over and it did not fit. The commander. Not KL. Not my father, not Elder Torvan, not any name I had accounted for. A commander who knew my face, on an island the Academy classified, spoken by a dying mercenary who had no reason left to lie. Not KL. Not my father. Someone else entirely. 27 hours before the Demon Lord's first seal cracked the sky, and a demon commander already knew who I was and what I carried. The 3 marks on my wrist were not just 3 beasts. They were a signal, a beacon, lit the moment the last slot filled, broadcasting across whatever dark distance the demons listened from. And something out in that dark had already heard it. Something had already answered. The demon commander arrived at the Academy's outer gates with the first seal almost due to crack. A few hours out, by my count, no more. I felt it before the alarms sounded. A pressure across the whole grounds, a cold that had nothing to do with the weather, and the 3 hatchlings on and around me went rigid all at once. In demon sensing, 3 sealed legendary beasts bonded to a single tamer does not read like a strong student, it reads like a god waking up. That was the signal the last slot had lit, and this was the thing that had heard it, a commander sent not to raid, but to look. Borin the Assessor. That was its name, though it did not give it. I knew it from the novel the way I knew everything, and knowing it did not make it smaller. It did not attack. That was the first surprise, and the worst one, because a thing that attacks is a thing that is afraid you might win. Borin simply stood at the outer gate, on the far side of the Academy's defensive ward, and it spoke. It spoke my name, Aaron Vare, in a voice that came from no throat, carried on the cold air over the heads of 100 panicking students. It said it wanted to see the marks. It said it had been sent to assess. Not to kill. To measure. To carry a number home. The ward flared to life along the wall, a lattice of light, and the Academy came apart in the ordinary way institutions come apart. Teachers shouting, wards being reinforced, students herded toward the inner halls in a stampede that trampled every drill they had ever run. Kale's beasts panicked. I saw it across the courtyard, the storm lion and the ember fox, my old beasts, his stolen ones, thrashing against the commander's aura, wild-eyed, useless. Kale stood in the middle of them, trying to command a formation and getting nothing. His top-tier beasts reduced to trembling animals by the presence at the gate, and my brother left standing alone and exposed with his hands full of creatures that would not obey. The strength he had stolen from me was worth nothing here. He had built his whole life on beasts, and at the one moment they mattered, they failed him. I felt something then that I had not let myself feel through any of it. Watching KL stand alone in a ring of his own useless beasts, I understood the full size of what my family had done to itself. They had built their whole house on strength they could take, contracts you could tear off a wrist, beasts you could inherit and steal and parade. And the first time a real force stood at the gate, all of that taking added up to a boy in a courtyard holding leashes attached to nothing. Strength you steal is strength you do not understand. It fails you exactly when you need it, because it was never yours to command. My three did not panic. The god dragon hatchling stood up on my shoulder, slow, and its scales flared out, and for the first time since the cave, I saw it look like what it was. Then the ward failed to stop the thing it was built to stop, because the thing did not come as a demon. One of the assassins from the island had never been recovered. The leader, the one I had left conscious, the one who had said the commander knows your face. The extraction team had missed him. Voran had not. It reached across the ward line, into the mind of a human body standing just outside, and it took him. Possessed him. And a demon's spirit inside a human vessel does not read as a demon to a ward built to stop demons. The vessel walked across the ward line, through the lattice of light that should have burned anything from the dark, and the ward let a man pass because a man is what it saw. The commander was inside the grounds now, wearing a body, walking toward me. The god dragon hatchling reacted. It came off my shoulder to the ground and it stood in front of me, scales flared full, and it looked the vessel in the eyes and did not blink. That was the first time I had ever seen it look something in the eyes and not blink. Everything before this, the scouts, the storm lion, it had frozen with a glance and never had to try. This was different. This was the hatchling deciding, for the first time, that a glance would not be enough. Around us the academy was still coming apart. Somewhere a bell was ringing that no one had rung in living memory, the deep breach bell, the one that meant the ward had failed. Teachers were forming a line that would not hold. Students were pressed into doorways watching a thing walk across the courtyard that their whole education had promised them could not get in. And in the middle of all of it I stood very still, because I knew that running was the one thing that would end me. The vessel would simply follow, patient, and take what it came for my body wherever it fell. The vessel came on. It did not want me dead. I understood that as it walked. It wanted the three hatchlings, the seals, the shards, to take them by force, off my body, back to the dark. Killing me was incidental. Harvesting me was the mission. This was the part the novel never wrote, because in the novel there was no one on that wrist for a demon to want. I was improvising now, off the map, and improvising against a demon commander with 3 sealed shards it had been sent to harvest. I knew one thing the book had given me. That Voran did not fight when it could take, that it preferred the vessel intact, and I was trying to build a plan around that single fact when the choice was taken out of my hands. Professor Laren stepped in front of me. I had not seen him arrive. He was simply there, between me and the vessel, slight and old and utterly calm, and I opened my mouth to tell him to move and did not get the chance. Laren had one beast. A study beast, a theoretical tier creature, the sort most tamers laughed at, the sort you kept for reference and never for a fight. He had spent 50 years cataloging legendary creatures, every aura pattern he had ever recorded, and the beast was the repository of all of it. It could not fight, but it could replicate. For roughly 30 seconds it could project the resonance of a legendary aura it had studied. A copy, a bluff, a wall of borrowed presence that a demon commander, for 30 seconds, could not tell from the real thing. 30 seconds is enough. The vessel checked its stride. For half a heartbeat, Voran could not read whether the ancient thing standing in its path was a hatchling's protector, or a fourth legendary beast it had not accounted for, and in that confusion it struck. Hard, fast, to clear the obstacle. Laren took the hit meant to go through him, his borrowed aura shattered. He went down, folding onto the stone, and he did not get up, and blood ran dark from beneath him. Not dead, but badly hurt. Gajal. The god dragon hatchling saw Laren fall. And I made a choice. I did not run, and I did not freeze. I stepped forward, over Lauren's body and into the vessel's path, and I did the one thing a tamer can do, that no beast can ask of itself. I threw the bond on my wrist wide open, every guard down, my whole soul bared to the ancient thing folded inside the hatchling. Take it, I told it, without words, all of it. I trust you, I release you. Whatever you have been holding back for 300 years, hold it back no longer. I felt the seal crack before I saw it. There was a sound like ice giving way under a great weight, deep in the hatchling's back. In the compressed thing it had folded itself into 300 years ago, and I felt it break through the bond on my wrist like a bone breaking in my own arm. The seal on the hatchling ruptured. Not a slow expansion, not a growing, an instant. One moment there was a dog-sized red thing standing over a fallen professor, and the next the entire academy grounds were full of dragon. Red aura burst outward in a wall of heat and compressed light, filling the courtyard, the walls, the sky above the towers, 500 meters of it in every direction. Every scrap of demon fog in that radius, the vessels, the commanders, the residue in the air, ignited and burned to nothing in a single breath. The stone glowed. The wards, the real ones, flashed and held by luck, and the possessed vessel stopped moving. The burst did not spare me. I had opened myself to it, and it went out through me on its way to the world. All three marks lighting at once and then catching, searing, a god-tier pulse, tearing down bonds that had never carried a fraction of this before. It drove me to one knee on the hot stone. When I could look again, the skin around the three marks was scorched raw and blistering. The gold script burned bright as a fresh brand, and I understood that holding all three at the moment a god woke was not a thing a body did for free. I had asked for it, now I would wear it. The mercenary's body dropped where it stood. Vorin was expelled from it, torn out. For the first time I saw the commander's true form, the thing behind the borrowed face. Something vast and cold and layered, more shadow than shape, recoiling from the red light like a hand pulled back from a fire. It could not stay in the vessel, and it could not stay in the aura, and it fled upward, away from the burning air, back toward the gate. The hatchling was not a hatchling anymore. It stood in the center of the scorched courtyard at half its original sealed size, and growing, red scales, gold-tipped, gold eyes banked like coals, not fully unsealed. The first layer was gone, only the first, but that was enough to empty a battlefield. Every beast on the grounds had gone silent. Every student stood frozen where the light had caught them. And KL Stormlion, pressed flat against the courtyard wall and shaking, lowered its head all the way to the ground. Complete submission. Total. To the thing at the center of the fire, not to the boy who held its contract. KL watched from across the courtyard. His face, when I found it, was unreadable. Not humiliation this time, not rage, nothing I had a name for. Just a man looking at the size of what his family had thrown away. I should have felt triumph, maybe. My brother, watching my beast do the thing his stolen beasts could never do, in front of the whole academy. But I did not feel triumph. I felt the heat still coming off the stone, and I felt the professor's blood under my hands, and I understood that I had not won anything. I had only survived a scout. The thing the scout reported to was still out there, and it was larger than Voran, and it had just been handed my exact measurements. I did not look at him long. I went to Laren. He was breathing. Shallow, but breathing, and his eyes found mine when I knelt beside him. My hands were shaking as I pressed against the wound. The burned skin around my three marks screaming every time I flexed my fingers, the first wound in all of this that was mine and not someone else's. And I noticed the shaking with a strange distance, because I had known this was legendary. I had read it. I had read the word God 100 times on the page. But there is a difference between reading that a god once existed, and kneeling in its light while it decides whether to show you what it is. The heat was still coming off the stone. My beast had done that because it saw an old man fall, and I did not fully understand yet what I had bonded to. Above the gate, the commander held its shape for one moment before it went. It did not attack. It had never come to attack, and a thing that comes to assess does not stay to die. It had gotten what it was sent for the moment the first seal cracked and showed it a fraction of what I carried, and now it did the disciplined thing. The patient thing, the thing that frightened me more than any attack would have. It gave up the field. It saw the three marks on my wrist clearly now, all three, lit in the red light, the ancient script, the tangled lightning, the ash and ember. It had come to assess, and now it had its number, and the number was worse than anything it had been sent to expect. It did not attack. It had never come to attack. It turned, dissipating into the cold, and as it went it spoke, not to me, not to the burning courtyard, but upward, into the air above the academy, to something listening from very far away. 3 seals, it said, he holds all 3, tell the Lord. Then it was gone. It was reporting to someone. The Demon Lord's first seal cracked 8 minutes later, 3 hours ahead of the moment I'd calculated, a fracture in the far sky that only I understood the meaning of. I looked at my wrist, 3 marks. Then I looked at the scorched place above the gate where the commander had been standing. And I thought about the part of the novel's last chapter I had never told anyone, the part I had carried alone since the day I woke up in this body. The 3 legendary beasts were never meant to be bonded separately. That was the whole secret. God Dragon, Storm Serpent, Ash Phoenix, sealed apart, hidden apart, guarded by mechanics that only opened for an empty tamer, all so that no single person could ever gather them. Because gathered, bonded together, to one vessel, they were not 3 beasts. They were the 3 shattered pieces of something the Demon Lord had broken 300 years ago, and spent 3 centuries making sure stayed broken. And I had just put all 3 of them on one wrist. I did not know yet whether carrying it would finish me, burn me out, use me up, the vessel consumed by the thing it reconstituted. Or whether it would make me the one thing the Demon Lord had always been afraid of, the reason he had shattered a god in the first place, rather than simply killing it. I did not know which, But the commander had seen. The commander had told the Lord. And whatever I was about to become, it was too late now to be anything else. I woke up on the floor of the medical wing. I had not meant to sleep. I had knelt by Professor Laren's bed some time after they carried him in, meaning to stay awake until he did, and my body had made the decision for me. I woke with my back against the frame of his cot, stiff and cold, the 3 hatchlings piled warm against my chest, and gray morning light coming through the high window. The skin around the 3 marks on my wrist was still raw, blistered and tight, aching when I closed my hand. The brand the unseal had left me, and the first cost in all of this that I had paid myself. Laren was still unconscious, breathing steady now. The Academy healers had done their work through the night, and the wound that should have killed a man his age had been closed. I left him sleeping and went outside to see what the courtyard looked like in daylight. The board had been updated. After a demon commander walks through your ward and a dragon burns the sky, the Academy still updates its rosters, because that is what institutions do. They file the impossible under a heading and move on. Every student's beast roster was posted, public, and mine sat where it always had. F grade. Beast, 3, unclassified. The Academy's machines still had no honest word for what I carried, so they left the word they had. But someone had written in the notes column, by hand, in ink. Forbidden Legend. I stood and looked at it for a long time. I did not know who had written it. I suspected Laren. It was the kind of thing he would do, quiet and certain and unsigned. But Laren had been unconscious all night and could not have. So someone else had looked at what happened in that courtyard, and reached for the only 2 words that fit, and written them on a public board where the whole Academy would read them. The rumor had a name now. It would not be contained. By midday it could not be contained at all. 3 separate noble houses filed independent incident reports about the attack, and once 3 houses have filed, the Academy cannot pretend a demon commander did not breach its gate. An official notice went up the chain to the Tamer Council. 1 student in possession of 3 legendary tier-sealed beasts, classification pending. Classification had never been assigned to a living student holding 3 legendary contracts, because it had never happened, because it was not supposed to be possible. The Council's classifier had no category for it, so they did the only thing a system does when it meets something outside every heading it owns. They assigned the note verbatim, the same 2 words the scanner crystal had flashed before it burned out on my first day. Forbidden Legendary Root. I thought about that first day, standing at the registration desk, while a Taish registrar shook a dying crystal and told me it had malfunctioned. It had not malfunctioned. It had simply been the first machine in the current era to look at what I carried and reach the bottom of its knowledge. And it had flashed the only words it had before the truth burned it out. Every institution I had touched since then had done the same thing in slow motion. The Academy. The instructors. Now the Council. Each of them had looked at me, run out of categories, and written down the same helpless sentence. The world had a word for me now, and the word was an admission that it had no word for me. That suited me. A thing without a category is a thing without a rule, and a thing without a rule is free to move. KL came to find me that afternoon. No escort. No elders. No father standing behind him. He came alone across the scorched courtyard, and I watched him come, and I did not reach for anything, because I could see in the way he walked that he had not come to fight. He stopped a few feet from me. He looked at my wrist, the 3 marks, 3 scripts, 3 languages, gold that would never fade. He looked at them for a while. I let him look. There was no danger in it now. 3 weeks ago, KL had reached for my contracts across a ceremony floor with his arm already extended, certain that taking them made him larger. He had learned since then what taking was worth. His stolen beasts had knelt to mine and then failed him at the gate. And his father had gone behind his back to make peace with the thing he had tried to bury. And now he stood in a burned courtyard looking at 3 marks he could not read and would never be able to hold. He was not larger. He had spent the whole term getting smaller, one certainty at a time, and he had finally gotten small enough to ask an honest question. He did not apologize. I had not expected him to, and I would not have believed it if he had. He did not threaten me. He asked one question, and it was not the question I expected. Were they always supposed to end up with you? I thought about it honestly, because it deserved an honest answer. The novel did not address it. In the story I had read, the original Eren died in the wilds as a boy. And the god dragon stayed sealed in its cave, and the storm serpent stayed behind its drowned gate, and the ash phoenix wore its crater down to nothing and was never freed. The 3 of them were never gathered. The world the novel described was a world where I had failed before I began. There was no destiny in which these 3 came to me. There was only the chain of things my family had done. No, I said. They weren't supposed to end up with anyone. You made it happen, you and father both. You emptied me out, and empty was the only key that fit the locks. If you'd left me my 3 beasts, I'd have died an ordinary tamer in an ordinary house. Fate! Not fate. Huh? Kale took that in. He did not argue it. He looked at me a moment longer, and then he turned and walked away across the burned stone without another word. I watched him go. In the novel, Kael Veyer died in the second siege, cut down with his stolen beasts around him, one more casualty of a war he never understood. I did not know if that would still happen. I did not know if anything in the novel would still happen. I had changed too much of it already, pulled too many threads, saved people who were meant to die and freed things that were meant to stay sealed. The book I had read was a map to a country that no longer existed. I was walking off the edge of it now into pages nobody had written. I spent the middle of that day the way I had spent most of my time in this world, reading the board, watching the leaks pool, counting the hours. The first seal had cracked the night before, 3 hours early, and no one around me knew what the fracture in the far sky meant. Students pointed at it and speculated. Instructors called it an atmospheric disturbance and told everyone to return to their halls. I looked at it and read a countdown. The Demon Lord had begun. In the novel, the world had another few years before it understood what that crack was. Years the original characters spent unprepared, and by the time they understood, the second siege had already taken Sion and half the noble houses. I had those years in my head. That was the whole of my advantage. Not the three beasts, the years. Laren woke that evening. He was awake but bound to the bed, and I sat beside him, and for a while neither of us spoke. He was the one who broke it. You have read something about those three, he said, that I have not. I have catalogued legendary creatures for 50 years. I have never seen 3 bond to 1 tamer. I have never seen it recorded that it could be done. And yet. He nodded weakly at my wrist. Tell me why. There's a reason for that, I said. He waited. He was good at waiting. The 3 of them, I said. God Dragon, Storm Serpent, Ash Phoenix. They're not 3 separate beasts. They never were. They're 3 parts of the same thing. One thing, broken into 3, and each piece sealed away in a place that would only open for a tamer with nothing left to hold it. That was deliberate. That was so no one person could ever gather all 3. Laren went very still on the bed. The Demon Lord shattered it, I said, 300 years ago. He broke it into 3 pieces and scattered them because he couldn't destroy it, and a thing you can't destroy you hide, in pieces, behind locks you hope no one ever fits the key to. The novel called it the primordial god, sealed into 3 vessels to keep it from ever being used against him again. And the only way to put it back together, the only way to reconstitute it, is to have all 3 shards bonded, at the same time, to 1 tamer. Which makes you, Laren said slowly, the vessel, I said, if I let it reconstitute. Yes. The 3 hatchlings were on the window ledge. All 3, in a row, and I realized they had been watching me the whole time I spoke, the God Dragon steady, Kareth still for once, the Ash Phoenix calm as it always was. Quiet. Patient. Waiting on me the way they had all waited 300 years for a tamer who could hold them. They had heard everything. They understood better than Laren did. Do you intend to, Laren asked, reconstitute it? I looked at my wrist. 3 marks. I thought about the last chapter of the novel. The part written in the margins almost, the part the author had buried so deep that most readers would have skimmed past it as mythology. The vessel who gathered the 3 shards could put the god back together, but the book was not clear on what happened to the vessel when he did. There were 2 readings. In one, the vessel was consumed. A candle burned to light a greater fire, the man used up entirely in the making of the god. In the other, the vessel became the god's hands in the world, its will, the thing the Demon Lord had shattered a god specifically to prevent from ever existing. The author had left it ambiguous on purpose. I had read that passage a dozen times and I still did not know which ending was mine. I don't know yet, I said, but the Demon Lord does. That's why the commander was sent. He's not afraid of 3 legendary beasts, he's afraid of what they add up to. He's afraid I'll finish the thing he spent 3 centuries taking apart. The world outside the medical wing did not wait for me to decide. Within 12 hours of the incident report, 3 noble houses sent formal envoys to the academy. The Tamer Council issued a summons, not disciplinary, I noted, but a recruitment, which told me everything about how fast the ground had shifted. 2 of the envoys came from houses that, in the novel, had sat near the top of the Demon Lord's list of first targets. They did not know they were on that list. I did. I met with none of them. I had Darius Fell stand at the door and turn them away, and Darius, who 3 weeks ago had mocked me for an F grade in a courtyard, did it with a straight back and a flat voice, and I marked that too. He was becoming the man who would open 3 vault doors in a siege. He just did not know it yet. Sion Aldrace found me at the east gate. I was leaving. Pack on my back, 3 hatchlings distributed across my shoulders and forearm. The dusk falcon chick dried and blinking against my chest, and Sion stepped into the gateway as though he had been waiting for me to appear. Where are you going? He said. The next seal site, I said. There are 9 more. He blinked. 9 more what? Places the Demon Lord doesn't want me to find. He looked at me for a long beat, the scorched gauntlet still on his hand, the sentence I had given him on the island still unfinished behind his eyes. I could see him deciding something. In the novel, Sion Aldrace was meant to lead the third arc, and he had the instincts for it. Courage, loyalty, the reflex to walk toward the fire. He had only ever had the wrong information. I had the information. He had the instincts. That was not a bad trade if I could keep him alive long enough to make it. Can I come? He asked. I considered it. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Do you want to live past the second siege? He did not ask what the second siege was. He held my eyes and answered. Yes. Then stay close, I said. And we walked out through the east gate together, the original protagonist and the transmigrated reader, 3 legendary beasts between us and a demon lord's countdown already running in a sky only I could read. 3 beasts. 3 seals. 3 parts of a god that a demon lord spent 300 years trying to keep buried. I had read the novel. I knew how the story was supposed to end. But the novel ended with Sion Aldrace dying in the second siege and the demon lord beginning his third approach. That was the story the world had been living. I was going to write a different ending. Not because I was the hero. I wasn't. I was a transmigrated reader with 3 legendary beasts and a pocket full of knowledge I was only allowed to use once. But I had 41 years of Demon Siege history in a dead world written down somewhere I could still read. And this time, the Demon Lord was going to find out what happens when you shatter a god and someone puts it back together.